Welcome to the Highly Sensitive Podcast. I'm Lauren LaSalle, and I'm a licensed therapist, highly sensitive person, and HSP coach. This bi-weekly podcast is meant for highly sensitive people and their loved ones, as both experiences will be discussed. Thank you for joining me, and let's begin. For today's episode, I am joined by my husband, Cliff, who is not a highly sensitive person, to talk about his experience being married to me, a highly sensitive person. To plan for this conversation, I showed him the HSP self-test, which you can find on hsperson.com, and he picked out the characteristics that he is most aware of in me. Now, before we get into the episode, I want to remind you that if you have any ideas for episode topics, if you have any questions for me to answer on the podcast, or if you would like to write an email sharing your story for me to read on the podcast, you can email me at lauren@laurenlasallecoaching.com. You can find out more about my coaching program, as well as resources and links to my social media by visiting my website at laurenlasallecoaching.com. All right, now let's get into the conversation. Hi, Cliff.
Hi, happy to be here.
All right, so let's get into the list. So the first one is I tend to be very sensitive to pain.
Okay. Yeah, for me, dealing with that, it took a while to get used to. I work at a factory, and you get like small cuts and things like that all the time. So that one definitely had a learning curve on what actually hurt, like you physically or in general, like when you like stub your toe or whatever, and how strong you'd react. I think because a lot of times with me, when I do something like that, I try and keep it in and, just wince a lot and walk around. And you're very vocal.
And I feel like that also applies to when I'm sick. It tends to affect me a lot more than it would you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure that was an adjustment for you to get used to also.
Yeah. You like to let me know how you're feeling.
I do. I'm very vocal about how I'm feeling, which I'm sure is kind of a good thing and also a not so fun thing on your side.
Yeah, I guess with little stuff,
Mm-hmm.
with like small headaches or whatever.
Yeah, and I've always been like that too. All right, so the next one is I'm easily overwhelmed by strong sensory input.
Yeah, so that one, I have it kind of a little bit with like chewing and everything and hearing it and all that. But I would find that you would be doing that, like having chips or apple slices, whatever. And then right when you're done, you kind of like pick up on whatever sounds I'm making, which could have been exactly what you were doing a second ago. So there's been times where I'm like, I want to have potato chips. So I'm just going to stand on the other side of the room. And you'll be like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm eating chips. And you'll kind of laugh and realize I'm just trying to not deal with you staring at me.
I know. And I do appreciate that you do that too. That's very nice, because those sounds do really kind of drive me crazy. Okay, the next one is I find myself needing to withdraw during busy days into bed or into a darkened room or any place where I can have some privacy and relief from stimulation.
I think with that one, I really noticed it most when was that our first vacation together, going to Disney?
I think so.
And like, I remember like my mom loves to go to Disney. So we used to go all the time. And her thing was you have to get there when the park opens and leave when the park closes. So we were used to doing, full days in the Orlando heat and just pushing through it. And when we went together, I would give in and we would go back to the hotel to relax for a little while, or like just basically swim around in the pool for like a half an hour and then go back to the park.
Mm-hmm. And you seem to have kind of accepted that at this point, that I need that, because that was like 6 years ago. We hadn't even been together for a whole year yet.
Yeah.
And in my family, we all need that time to just kind of decompress. And it sounds like your family's the total opposite. So if we hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't have made it through until the parks closed, because I would just be cranky and tired.
With that also, I remember like early on, like early in dating, we would go out to the bar with friends and everything. And I was used to being, single most of the time when I'd go out. So you kind of go until you kind of tire out, and then you kind of say your goodbyes and leave. And I realized quickly that with you, you'd be like, okay, we need to go, basically. And I'd be kind of doing like the wind down of like a few more conversations and everything. And I learned quickly, you're like, I need to go, is like, I'm like almost falling asleep. Let's go.
Yeah. And I think I've gotten better about like giving you more time to kind of say goodbye, because then when we were first dating, I think I felt bad being like, all right, I need to go. So I would just hold out until I couldn't take it anymore. And then I would immediately need to leave, which I guess in retrospect is not the best way really to handle that situation. So now I definitely make it a point to kind of notice when I'm hitting that point and then be like, hey, Cliff, I'm going to have to go in like half an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that gets pushed into like 45 minutes because it always comes up quick.
Yeah. So the next one is, I am particularly sensitive to the effects of caffeine.
So I don't know if you want to tell the story of you, like I heard about how you were with energy drinks, because now you just drink like one cup of tea and it usually isn't even caffeinated. So.
Yeah. When was this? In my early 20s, I think. I was introduced to energy drinks, and I don't think I even drank caffeine before that. So the first two energy drinks I had, I threw them all back up, which you'd think would be my body telling me like, don't consume this. But it does make me feel very jittery and just kind of like wired if I have too much. And then I think the crash when it wears off is a lot. So yeah, I just have like a cup of tea in the morning now, and it seems to be kind of the perfect amount. But really, I should have listened to my body back then.
Yeah, and I grew up a soda drinker and everything. So I think when I was a kid, like drinking a soda, then going to bed, just kind of, I think my body weirdly got used to that. So like,
oh yeah,
I don't always notice caffeine a lot. So it was kind of weird hearing you talk about that, and, knowing that you can drink like a non-caffeinated tea and be fine throughout the day.
Well, my tea has caffeine. It's just like a mini amount.
Yeah.
But that's another thing too, is that you can drink caffeine late in the day and it's fine and you can sleep. But if I drink caffeine after like noon, it doesn't make me feel any more awake. It just makes it so I cannot fall asleep, which is very inconvenient.
And maybe that comes from, like, I do factory work, so I wake up at like 6 a.m. and I'm at work at 7, and you just gotta get going. And I think with a lot of your work, it seems like you've been able to kind of, ramp up into the morning.
So the next one is, I am easily overwhelmed by things like bright lights, strong smells, coarse fabrics, or sirens close by.
So you cut tags out of your clothing, and there's been times, I think, where you kind of like in the middle of the day, you're like, I need to get rid of this tag. And some of that wasn't that weird because my mom cuts the tags out of her shirts, and I kind of got used to like that was just a thing, but not like, I don't think it's all of them, but it's more or less every single one.
Yeah, tags are the worst. and I will sometimes not notice one for part of the day, and then it's just like rubbing on me. I have to remove it or the day cannot continue. All right. Let's see the next one. I am made uncomfortable by loud noises.
I think I noticed it a little bit with going out, kind of like before talking about like big events and stuff like the Disney thing where there's just so many people. Like with me, I like to just try and like push through and get to the next part of it. Or like, with like the parks, going to the next ride and everything. And I think you need to kind of like not just be in the big swarm of people and get to that area, but just kind of like cautiously move through.
Yeah, it's a lot, especially big parks like that, because it's usually hot when you're there. It's usually loud. There are usually a ton of people, and it's just a lot to like, I don't know, process and deal with for me. So I do need to kind of take it easy in those situations and have some like downtime if I can. The next one is I am deeply moved by the arts or music.
So you're a big fan of the opera fan. And I learned like the first time we went, like trying to impress you, brought you to Broadway to see Phantom. And I look over and you're crying during it. And then I realized after that we watched the movie and you cried during that. And then every time you watch Phantom, you cry at some point. Yes. And I didn't know, or I didn't expect it, I guess, like every single time. I thought maybe live it'd be different, but it's anytime you watch a movie or sometimes like even a music clip from it, I'll look over and you'll be crying.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, other things make me cry too, like other musicals, or especially if it's live. I think I get like really excited and then I'll start crying. Or like TV shows, but I don't know. There's something about Phantom of the Opera. I've seen it like I couldn't even tell you how many times. 3 times on Broadway. I've seen the movie a zillion times, and there's something about it that just really gets to me. And I think that was probably a lot for you to process.
Yeah, it was a little surprising.
Yeah. Well, and like some like TV shows, especially those reality shows where the people like Undercover Boss, where they're given, money or help for whatever. Oh, man, those really, really make me cry too. But especially the arts and music. I mean, I've done theater and I've played instruments for like pretty much my whole life. So theater and music have a really big part in my life. So I don't know. It kind of makes sense, I guess, that it would be emotionally, I don't know what the word is. Overwhelming. There we go. Okay. The next one is I startle easily.
Yeah, I learned that with when we got our first cat, he figured out a good way to startle you a lot. He which isn't a good habit, but he jumps on the door frame at like eye level a lot of times, and he waits for you. I've watched him, you be in the bathroom, and he'd just be waiting outside, and right when you open the door, he'd jump away and run, and it's like a game, and definitely startled pretty easily.
Yes. But the funny thing about him doing that is that he is also highly sensitive, and everything makes him get scared. And yet he thinks it's so hilarious to scare me.
Mm-hmm.
And I also remember at one of our apartments, you would like walk around this corner or something, and sometimes we'd be going in opposite directions, and I would just scream because I didn't know you were right there, which I think you got tired of pretty fast. But I mean,
Yeah, sometimes I was like, how did that scare you? You were just talking to me. Like things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't know you were right there. Let's see. I think this is the last one. Yes, the last one. I make a point to avoid violent movies and TV shows.
Yeah, I feel like you've sometimes told me that you try to avoid them, but I feel like I get home and you're like, oh, during lunch I just watched a scary movie and now my stomach hurts. And I feel like you don't avoid them very well, but you talk about trying to avoid them and like making a note that like after I watch a scary movie, you know, my stomach hurts.
Yeah, that is true. I guess I would say don't, when it comes to movies and TV shows, like if it's a scripted fake thing, I don't avoid it. Or sometimes even if it's based on a real thing. If it's like the news and it's violent or something, or sad, I can't do that. I definitely try to avoid that. But I think I started really getting into like horror movies and dark stuff when I was really depressed, like in my late teens, early 20s, because it just felt kind of relatable, I guess, like the mood. And so that's why I think I like that. But now it definitely does give me a stomach ache, even though I still enjoy them sometimes. I think I don't always enjoy them as much as I used to.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say like a lot of this stuff kind of like sounds like a lot to deal with or almost negative sometimes, but you know, with how you are, you know, you care very deeply. For me, like if I'm not feeling well or if I'm having a bad day, you definitely catch on very quick and you kind of feel it out to see if you should, you know, try and help me out with it or give me space. And I feel like, you know, a lot of this stuff was negative, but it's not like bad. And a lot of the good stuff is great in comparison of just how much you care and what you do for me.
Aw, thank you. Yeah, I mean, you have really I feel like taken the time to learn about me and all of these, like, you know,
Quirks.
yeah, I feel like you've taken a lot of time to learn about my quirks and you accept them now, even if at first it was kind of a lot to take in. And you definitely try to be as accommodating as you can when there are things that I kind of can't really have much control over, like hearing the chewing. I I don't know what to do about that. Like that, I just need the space, I think, so it's not so loud. So I really appreciate that you do things like that.
Hmm.
And
And some of the stuff is like fun to hear about because like you have some childhood things you talk about with like your socks and overall. So
well, the overalls. So I exclusively wore overalls in fifth grade because I was so tall and so thin. And back in that time, they didn't have so many like clothing options, I guess, that fit that body type. And so I had to wear overalls because it was the only thing that fit my waist. Yeah, and as a kid, I used to, I guess this was when I was pretty young, I would pull my sock away from my, like out, like the toe part out away from my foot and fold it over and then put my shoe on. And I think that might have been because of the seam. I didn't like how the seam felt. I don't know, but I've always had kind of weird little things like that. That my parents were like, what are you doing? But I think you are aware of those things and you kind of understand where it comes from and you somehow know what to do to help me in most situations, I would say. And also you are very validating of how I feel and very supportive. And I wish everybody had somebody like you.
Thank you. I do my best.